The sky over Vardheim burned with winter aurora, its ribbons of jade and gold reflected in the ice fields that circled the village. It was said the gods themselves carved their runes each dawn upon the northern wind, and that those who listened with open hearts could hear their sorrow as clearly as their laughter. Astrid, daughter of the woodcarver, felt the weight of these stories every step she took along the frostbound paths. She was 16, her hands skilled at shaping wolf talismans from driftwood, her thoughts heavy with the absence of her younger sister, Kinna, who had vanished into the mist a year past. The loss knotted Astrid's heart, filled her dreams with shadow, and left her eyes searching every horizon for a sign, a sound, a return. Vardheim was a place of memory. Its elders recited the names of drowned sailors and lost hunters at every moonrise. Yet the ache Astrid carried felt singular, sharp as the ice, endless as the fjord. Her mother, Signa, tried to comfort her, but she too was cracked by grief, her singing voice reduced to whispers against the hearth. Astrid's father, Olaf, believed in action. He built cairns for the missing, woven with pine boughs, and set them at the edge of the village where the ice met the sea. "Let the gods see our pain," he said, "and bring the lost home or give us peace." But peace was slow to come. On the last night of winter, Astrid found herself at the edge of the wolfwood, clutching a carving of Kinna's favorite animal. The air was so still she could hear her own heartbeat. She knelt upon the roots and spoke aloud, not to the gods, but to her sister. "If you wander between worlds, let me cross with you. Let me understand why you left, or take me along." A sudden wind surged, carrying the scent of snow and wildflowers. From the darkness, a wolf, a pale beast with eyes like embers, appeared. It stared at Astrid, unafraid. She remembered the old stories. When the boundary between life and death grew thin, the wolves guided souls along secret paths, neither lost nor found. Astrid rose, meeting the wolf's gaze. "Are you the sign?" she whispered. The creature bowed its head, and in the instant its muzzle touched the earth, shadows bloomed. Before her stood a woman clad in a cloak of feathers and antlers, her face painted with fading runes. The woman's eyes contained storms. She spoke in a voice both cold and beautiful. "Loss is the price of memory within the weave. Yours is young and raw, but it calls to older threads. If you wish to find the unseen, you must bear what you dread. The path is pain and truth together." Astrid's legs quaked, but she did not flee. "I must know. I must see Kinna again, even if only within the bone of my heart." The woman nodded. "The animal spirits will be your guides, and the world will open its wounds and wonders both. But beware, every gift carries shadow, and every answer births new longing." In a flash, the wolf circled Astrid and set out into the wood. Astrid followed, letting the sorrow lead her onward. Deep beneath the trees, she encountered other lost things: a hunter's broken bow, a child's shoe, the remnants of old offerings, each vibrating with story. She gathered these objects, piecing together the fragments of village grief, sensing her own loss merging with theirs. At dawn, Astrid found herself before a stone altar carved with ancient symbols she could not read. The wolf pressed a paw against the stone. Runes shimmered blue in the morning haze. From the altar rose a vision. Kinna standing on a distant shore, her hair tangled with seaweed, her eyes alight with both joy and regret. "Sister," Astrid called, tears streaming down her face. Kinna smiled, voice echoing like wind through pine. "You cannot bring me back, but you can carry me forward. Take the pain, make it a bridge, not a wall." The wolf howled, and the forest filled with the songs of unseen birds. Astrid buried her carving beside the altar, and in its place, petals bloomed, first white, then gold. The vision faded, but the warmth lingered. Astrid carried her sorrow with new strength, the ache transformed into something tender, resilient, and fierce. She returned to Vardheim, changed. She crafted cairns for all the lost, taught others to carve talismans not only for what was gone, but for what remained. The villagers joined her in a new ritual, singing by the fire, forging hope beside the stories of suffering. And above them, the aurora danced more brightly than before, its colors a tapestry woven from grief, memory, and rebirth. Spring thawed the snow's cruel grip around Vardheim. But the chill within Astrid endured, softened only at the edges by the warmth of ritual and memory. Days became longer. Sunlight slipped through cracks in the clouds and set the ice to singing. Astrid, now recognized as a crafter of both talisman and tradition, found her story echoing through the voices of elders and children alike. After the renewal ritual, a stranger arrived in the village. He was called Jorn, a traveler from the southern valleys, bearing a staff topped by a triangle of carved whalebone. His gaze was sharp, yet gentle, and his arms were ringed with old scars. He brought news, a troubling string of disappearances along the coast, families broken, and rumors of a shadow that preyed on those who mourned too fiercely. Astrid spoke with Jorn beneath the starlit sky. He told her of his wife, lost to the sea's hunger during a moonless night, and of his daughter, Halla, whose silence had grown so profound she would not even weep. "I searched not for the lost," he said, "but for a way to give the living their voices back." Moved, Astrid invited him to join her in reworking the night's rituals. They carved together, a whale for Jorn, a wolf for Astrid, twining the familiar with the new. As they traded stories, Astrid felt the boundary between her grief and Jorn's growing thin, stitching wounds with empathy. During the spring festival, children danced among stones hung with the carvings. Jorn stood by Halla, who at first lingered silent behind his cloak. Astrid knelt and showed her how to shape a bird from pine. "A gift," she explained, "to carry words even when mouths could not." Halla cracked the wood, then hummed a note so quiet it barely reached the fire. The bird became a chorus, and others joined in, their humming intensifying, until the night pulsed with healing song. Later, Astrid dreamed again of the antler-crowned woman. This time, the spirit stood at the edge of an unnamed fjord. Her mask was half shadow, half starlight. "Loss is not static," she intoned. "It moves and reshapes. Even those who imagine themselves healed may find new fissures." When Astrid awoke, she wondered, could communities heal, or only individuals? Jorn suggested they travel. He had been summoned by another settlement racked with sorrow, a place called Eirik at the mouth of the Ice River. He asked Astrid to join him, sensing her heart's talents were needed there. Her mother, Signa, protested. "Vardheim needs you," she urged, "and loss that travels sometimes never returns." But Astrid had learned from the wolf, the altar, and the ritual. The only way forward is to bring what we've learned into darkness and light alike. She promised to return. Together, Astrid, Jorn, and Halla crossed the wildlands. Lakes shimmered with ghosts of old fishers. Winds carried tears and courage in equal measure, and every village held its own patterns of grief. Some welcomed them, others repelled, mistrusting outsiders' gifts. At Eirik, the river itself seemed to mourn. Houses huddled close against the wind, all color leached from their banners. The villagers revealed that every spring, the river swept away one child. They sought answers in stone and silence, but felt only the cold. Astrid organized a listening circle, the first ever held beneath the great ash, the oldest tree in Eirik. She invited everyone to carve their own tokens, not for what was lost, but for the ache within that remained. The process was slow, clumsy, awkward in tears. Yet when the final moon rose, a pile of offerings surrounded the ash. Astrid led a fire ritual. Each person placed their carving in the flames, naming aloud not only their sorrow, but their hope. The river's song shifted. What was once only wailing grew layered with the voices of the living. During the night, the water shimmered with aurora, casting the faces of the lost and the remaining side by side on the waves. For the first time in a generation, no children vanished. Instead, a new festival was born, the naming of the river, where all who survived sang the names of both the lost and themselves. Jorn wept for his wife, but Halla sang openly by the flames, her voice now open, her grief braided with strength. Astrid wrote in her journal, "Grief will always wander, but sometimes it arrives home. The stories we offer to the world do not end its pain, but they change what pain becomes." As the travelers prepared to continue, the ash dropped a single blossom at Astrid's feet, a sign, she believed, that the spirits favored not only rituals, but journeys that never end. Together, she, Jorn, and Halla set out for the next settlement, the aurora dancing overhead, its colors now emboldened by every voice that had found healing through the alchemy of shared loss. The spring sun lingered longer as Astrid, Jorn, and Halla traveled northward, following river valleys strung with mist. The land here was restless. Shadows spilled from old burial mounds and pine forests whispered secrets too faint for waking ears. Grief was everywhere, sometimes a wound, sometimes a shield. Their journey led them to a settlement called Roldstrand. Unlike Vardheim and Eirik, it lay beside a lake said to be a mirror to the worlds of gods and ancestors. The villagers guarded its shore, believing both blessings and curses could slip through with the dawn fog. Roldstrand was ruled by Elder Greta, a woman with one blind eye and a heart as fierce as iron. Greta greeted the travelers skeptically. "We honor loss, but some wounds grow wild, like thistle in good soil. Not all pain can be pruned without killing what remains." Astrid nodded, sensing depth behind Greta's words. The night of their arrival, they joined the village's silent vigil by the water's edge. Everyone held a stone, either plain, for the forgotten, or carved, for the remembered. Halla clutched her pine bird, Jorn his whale token. Astrid held ash blossoms from Eirik. At dawn, Greta led a chant, and one by one the villagers cast their tokens into the lake. The water shimmered, gold and blue, while the wind carried whispers that seemed to speak in every voice ever stilled by loss. Astrid watched the stones sink, rippling outward. Something in her heart moved, a sense not of release, but remembrance that deepened with each song. As the ceremony ended, an old man approached Astrid. His name was Eirik, a carver haunted by the recent disappearance of his son, Steiner. He confessed to Astrid that he could no longer believe in reunion, only endurance. "If memory is all we have," he said, "perhaps it's enough." Astrid sat beside Eirik each day, hearing his story piece by piece. Steiner had vanished beneath the ice 3 winters ago. No trace was found, but a single black feather lodged in a fallen tree. Eirik showed her a talisman he had shaped from the feather and bone, a symbol of longing etched with runes for courage. At night, Astrid dreamed the dreamer's dream, walking the ice, encountering women with antler crowns and men with wolf pelts, all bearing sorrow like armor. The lake became a mirror, and she saw her own reflection flicker into Steiner's face, then the faces of all she'd mourned, and all the world still mourning. When she awoke, the moon hung low, silver blue, and the pine bird Halla had shaped glowed faintly. Astrid realized that the bird was not just a token, but a key. She took it to the lake with Eirik, offered a quiet prayer, and cast the pine bird upon the water. To their astonishment, the lake responded. A circle of light spun outward, and beneath the surface they glimpsed the shadow of Steiner, reaching upward, runes ablaze on his palms. "It is not always reunion, but acknowledgement," Astrid said softly, "that sets the spirit free." With Greta's blessing, Astrid, Jorn, and Halla held a new ritual for all the lost, creating a floating ring of tokens for every villager's sorrow, sending it bobbing toward dawn. The act was both mourning and celebration, a bridge across the water. Jorn spoke, "Grief is the language of our becoming, not our ending." As they prepared to leave, Greta gifted Astrid a staff carved of lake driftwood, entwined with symbols of endurance. "Carry this to your next threshold," she said. "Let the gods see that the lake of memory has no final shore." The trio pressed onward, hearts lighter, yet carrying the songs of Roldstrand. Each step north was a journey into mystery. Each night beneath the aurora a new stanza in the epic of memory and transformation. Their next destination was rumored in tales, Hildgard, a place of warriors and poets, where loss became legend and legend shaped destiny. Astrid felt both fear and anticipation, knowing that every story woven so far had prepared her for the stories yet to be faced and shared. Beyond the mirrored lakes and forest shadows, Astrid, Jorn, and Halla trekked up into the high meadows edging Hildgard. The air was bracing, spiced with wild thyme and the lingering smoke of ancient pyres. Their road wound between standing stones and burial cairns, a land woven thick with stories of blood and wisdom, sacrifice and song. Hildgard was unlike any place they had yet seen. Towering wooden halls glowed with carvings of heroes and ancestors, each tale marked by both glory and grief. The people of Hildegard believed loss was the founding stone of greatness. No feast, no battle, no birth took place without first honoring those who had come before, and those who had disappeared into mist and myth. They were greeted by Ulf, a warden and renowned skald whose gold beard and sharp eyes lent weight to every word. "Our village remembers, but we do not always heal," Ulf said. "Tonight we mark the Day of the Lost, a feast for the honored missing. You may offer what tradition and your travels have taught." As darkness gathered, the central hall filled with song and heavy scents of roasted lamb and mead. Torches threw wild shadows on beams painted with wolves and stars. Ulf invited Astrid to carve a new rune for the memory pole, a towering column hung with tokens for every departed soul. Nervous, she knelt to shape the mark of the wandering wolf, honoring both her sister and all the lost children she'd met on her journey. Ulf began the feast with a fierce poem, calling forth both sorrow and pride. Warriors in wolf pelts recounted battle deaths, but also the pain of empty cradles, fields left and tilled, lovers sailed across the horizon. Each tale was wrapped in ritual, a song, a carved object, a shared cup. Jorn found kinship with the village shield makers, sharing the story of his wife's song that could once calm storms. Halla, emboldened by the music, stood beneath the memory pole and sang a clear, plaintive tune. Her first solo, the hush in the hall a testament to its truth. Later, Astrid joined Ulf atop the ridge where the older cairns gazed over the valley. "Our tradition is strong," Ulf told her, "but sometimes tradition is a shield we hide behind. Loss unshared becomes poison. Do you believe every grief can be healed?" "I believe every grief can be held," Astrid replied, "and that sharing makes the holding lighter. Your legends are true, but they can be gentler." Together, they led a midnight procession to the cairns, each person carrying a torch and their own token. At the highest point, Astrid spoke to the crowd. "Every hero remembered is a sorrow shared. Tonight, we mark not only sagas, but silent wounds. Every tear, every wish unspoken, every yearning unfinished." A hush fell as villagers placed tokens in the grass. Beads, scraps of ribbon, curls of hair, baby shoes. The names of ancestors long turned to dust. Astrid drove her driftwood staff into the earth at the cairn's heart. An eastern wind rose, light as breath, pulling the aurora down in shimmering tendrils. The tokens glimmered. For an instant, all present felt the presence of those they'd lost. Not returned, but acknowledged, their stories woven into song and silence. Ulf wept openly, and others followed. No shame, only release. As dawn stole color back from the night, Hildegard's people embraced the travelers. Their rituals had grown, a new feast to follow each loss, not just for warriors, but for anyone left behind. Astrid, Jorn, and Halla departed with hearts buoyed and burdens lighter. The staff of remembrance hummed under Astrid's grip, the circle of their tale widening ever further. Each village they visited gave them a new understanding, that tradition, when tempered by compassion, could be the strongest foundation for healing and change. Westward, rumors grew of a mountain where the oldest gods once wept for what time erased. There, it was said, even the greatest pain could be transformed, if the seeker was brave enough to name it. And so the saga pressed on, loss ripening into legacy, grief becoming a light seen even through the longest Nordic night. Heading north through the wild passes, Astrid, Jorn, and Halla traveled as the first green appeared in the valleys, a fleeting promise that even deepest winters yield to change. Their destination grew nearer, Bergheim, the mountain of echoes, a place villagers whispered about in reverent tones. It was said the gods themselves mourned here, and that to ascend was to face every wound ever carried. The journey was perilous. Snow still rimmed the peaks, and hungry wolves haunted the woods. Astrid's staff of remembrance glimmered faintly in the growing mist, sensing the presence of old spirits. Birds circled above with shrill and sorrowful calls, as if echoing the pain held by all who walked these trails. They arrived at Bergheim on the eve of a festival, a ritual called the Night of Tears. The villagers were reserved, sturdy folk who bore their griefs as badges. Their leader, Eir, greeted them with the gravity of one who has buried both a child and a legend. "You are welcome," Eir said. "But this is a place for confronting, not fleeing, haunted roots." That night, the village gathered at the base of the mountain. Each person carried a shadow stone, painted in ash and blood, representing a sorrow they could not shed. Astrid felt the weight and power of the stones, tokens of mothers who lost sons in avalanches, lovers lost to storms, dreams shattered by disease and betrayal. Eir led the group in an ancient chant, then spoke softly. "We carry our wounds because they remind us of what matters. The gods," it said, "left their own grief here so mankind would never feel alone." With a gesture, Eir invited Astrid, Jorn, and Halla to ascend with her. The climb was grueling, each step demanding a reckoning with fatigue and memory. Snow swallowed voices, turning all sound into solemn hush. Halfway up, the group paused beside a colossal boulder carved with 1,000 names, some legible, others washed away by time. Eir explained, "Every generation adds its sorrow here. It's not for the gods. It's for us, so we never forget ourselves." The villagers placed shadow stones at the base, whispering names and stories. Astrid held her sister's memory, Jorn his lost wife, and Halla the silence that once muted her soul. All three placed their tokens with trembling hands. A sudden wind whipped over the ridge, shaking crystals from the pine boughs. The sound was uncanny, like a choir rising and falling. Eir closed her eyes and sang a solo verse. Voice raw, each note a fragment of pain and hope braided together. Astrid felt an ancient presence, antlered and masked, like the spirit from her dreams. It stood on the wind, not corporeal, but real nonetheless. "You have carried loss far," it whispered, "but you must give it a shape grand enough for the world to bear. Speak your sorrow as blessing." Astrid rose and, with all she'd learned, spoke aloud to the assembled. "Grief is not what holds us back. It is what draws us together, makes us wise, makes us true. We give shape to pain not so we are diminished, but so our love is made visible." The boulder glowed, the names shimmered, and for a moment, faces appeared in the stone, kind, sad, undiminished by time. The group sang, a mixture of ancient hymn and Halla's new song. The aurora poured down the mountain like a river of color, weaving through every gathered soul. By dawn, the villagers felt something had shifted. Eir thanked the travelers, not with gifts, but with stories, each one entrusted to them to carry onward. The trio left Bergheim changed again. Astrid's staff was heavier with names, Jorn's heart lighter with hope, and Halla's voice fused with centuries-old hymns. They walked west, following the river. The world felt larger now, as if every sorrow given voice became a rung lifting them higher toward the next encounter. Rumors waited, a sea village where grief had turned to anger, threatening to break the cycle. Astrid knew that only together could mourning find its melody and prevent old wounds from becoming war. Astrid, Jorn, and Halla followed the river as it wound towards the coast, carrying echoes of Bergheim's songs in its rushing, ice-cold current. They entered Salvik, a village balanced between hope and fury, its houses perched on rocky cliffs against the northern sea's relentless assault. Salvik was a troubled place. The sea, their lifeblood, had stolen too many loved ones, and the pain had soured into a yearning for vengeance. On their arrival, the trio met Inga, a fisher's widow who ruled with iron forbearance. Her son, Otmar, had been taken by the waves during a summer storm, and since then, the village's rituals had grown harsh. Burning tokens, casting stones at the surf, cursing the gods and the dead alike. Astrid saw in Salvik a wound festering, too raw to heal on its own. She approached Inga at sundown. "For years, you taught your people to honor the sea and the ones it claimed. Let us help you find the gentler way again." Inga's eyes flashed. "We are past gentleness. Loss is an open mouth, swallowing comfort and reason. If the gods do not answer, we will force them." Jorn, ever patient, persuaded Inga to let them host their own ritual, a ceremony not of anger, but remembrance. "Let us mourn together," he urged, "and see what comes." Inga agreed on one condition. If their ritual failed to ease the village's suffering, they would leave by sunrise. At dusk, the villagers gathered by the roaring surf, faces pinched with cold and suspicion. Astrid distributed small driftwood figures, boats, wolves, whales, instructing each person to carve a word of pain or hope upon it. Hala led a melody, tentative at first, gradually swelling as more voices joined in. They placed the tokens in a circle on the sand, just above the line of foaming waves. Astrid spoke. "We have thrown so much into the sea. Our love, our rage, our memories. Tonight, let us give the sea not a curse, but a story. Let the waves carry our voices to the gods, if they dare listen." One by one, villagers recounted their losses. Inga stood silent, then stepped forward. For the first time, she described Otmar's laughter and his dreams for Solvik. The firelight flickered in her tears. The villagers joined her, and the circle swelled, grief rippling out until the entire shoreline hummed with longing and release. The wind shifted, the waves calmed. A faint aurora bent close, casting green light on the tokens, lingering longer than usual. From the surf, an old seal emerged, blinking solemnly, as if carrying the spirits of the lost. Ingo whispered a blessing for Otmar, and the seal dove deep, carrying it out to sea. The tension in Solvik broke. That night, the village feasted, remembering not with bitterness, but with bittersweet tenderness. New traditions took root. Instead of casting stones, they planted sea grass, sang Otmar's song, and let the surf become their candle of remembrance. Astrid, Jorn, and Hala slept on a bluff overlooking the ocean, hearts full with all they had witnessed and helped restore. Hala dreamed of moons and waves, of laughter returned. Jorn wrote poems in the sand, shapes washed away, but memory remaining. Before sunrise, Inga gifted Astrid a shell etched with runes for forgiveness. "You saw past my rage into the love beneath," she said quietly. "Carry this, and remember that grief must change, lest it consume all we have left." Their next journey would lead inland to Ulferdal, a valley where the dead were honored but never named. A place, it was said, between forgetting and true memory. Astrid wondered which was more painful, a grief too loud, or one lost in silence. As their boat slipped away from Solvik's harbor, the aurora pulsed overhead, the seal's shadow flickering beneath the water, and the horizon seemed, for one blessed moment, wide with possibility. The path to Ulferdal stitched through tangled forests, moss-draped stones, and fog-soaked meadows. For days, Astrid, Jorn, and Hala walked in quiet companionship, sensing a stillness deeper than any they'd found before. Ulferdal was famous across the northern lands for one thing, its silence. Here, loss was not spoken. It lived in the hush between breaths, etched into runes no one recited. The arrival of the trio drew curious stares. The villagers wore plain clothing, never adorned with tokens for the departed. Their leader, Old Solv, greeted them with a gentle nod, but no words. Solv led them to a great hall with walls covered in unmarked stones and a hearth that burned but rarely warmed. Astrid, unnerved, asked quietly, "Why does Ulferdal never speak the names of the lost?" Solv answered in a voice soft as falling snow, "We keep silence so spirits may rest. When word gives pain shape, some wounds only sharpen. This is how we survive." Hala found the absence of music strange and sad. Jorn struggled to write, without words to inspire him. Astrid felt the weight and wisdom in Ulferdal's custom, but also its cost, a yearning too vast to contain. That first night, Astrid walked the boundaries of the village. She found an old woman, Fried, sitting beneath a cedar tree. Fried pressed a stone into Astrid's palm, blank but heavy. "We remember in silence," she whispered, "but sometimes the heart begs the wind for song." Astrid gathered with Solv and the elders by the hall's unmarked stones. She spoke not of her own loss, but of the stories she'd gathered. She explained that in other villages, remembrance was a bridge, sometimes painful, but also a source of warmth and unity. Solv hesitated. "What you ask is hard. We do not wish our dead to be trapped by longing. But perhaps, once, we should try." Jorn suggested a wordless rite. A circle of hearth fires, a silent procession, each person placing a stone into a new cairn for memory's sake. No names, just the act, the joining together, the willingness to carry one another's burden for a while. Hala played a quiet melody on her whistle, drifting above the hush like an aurora's breath. The villagers gathered in a circle, each holding a blank stone, and walked in silence beneath the northern sky. As they placed the stones, Solve began a low hum, joined by all in slow, resonant cadence. No names broke the silence, yet a sense of release grew. The weight of grief shared without danger, the act of mourning held in trust by every hand. That night, Astrid dreamed of the cedar tree blooming with songbirds, their feathers glinting with runes. She awoke with a sense that Ulfrdal's sorrow was changing, trembling at the edge of transformation. In the days that followed, the village grew a new tradition. Each solstice, they built a cairn, walked in procession, hummed together, and pressed their stones into the earth. Ulfrdal did not become a village of song and story, but found itself lighter, the silence threaded with gentle sound. Solve thanked Astrid, Jorn, and Hala as they departed. You brought memory without pain. May you find a song for every sorrow you meet. Their journey next pressed onward to the legendary forest of Vigrid, where, it was said, the end and beginning of all things mingled in the roots. Here, myth itself waited for those brave enough to shape the fate of grief, tradition, and hope. As the trio left a changed Ulfrdal behind, the Aurora danced not just for the names of the lost, but for the stones of silent courage and the whispers of healing that could finally take root. The journey to Vigrid was long and winding, shadowed by ancient pines whose roots tangled together beneath soil that had never known a plow. Legends swirled about this forest, a place where the gods had once wept for the world's pain, where the end of all things and their beginning met in silence and storm. Few humans entered, fewer still returned unchanged. Astrid, Jorn, and Hala felt the forest's fabled gravity before setting foot within. Their footsteps softened to whispers on the moss. Stars hid behind the swelling branches. The deeper they walked, the more time seemed to bend, each tree ringing with old laughter and old loss. At dusk they reached a glade encircled by stones carved with spirals and feather marks. Here, a traveler awaited, a woman called Bryn, whose hair was wild with leaves and whose cloak gleamed with river pearls. She greeted them with an open hand. You seek the roots of change and the fate of grief. Vigrid is neither gentle nor cruel. It reflects what you bring. They joined Bryn for a firelit meal, learning she was the last guardian of the old rites, keeper of the forest's memory. We guard stories here until they are needed. Some bring tears, some bring songs. You may ask the roots for answers tonight, but their gift will shape the paths you walk forever. That night, beneath the arching trees, Bryn led them to the heart of Vigrid, a clearing with no boundary but moonlight, its ground furrowed with ancient runes. Each of you must plant a token here, and speak not what you wish to forget, but what you wish to transform. Astrid pressed her staff into the soil and spoke softly. I carry the ache of every lost child, the hardness of winter longing, and the yearning for meaning beyond pain. Let this sorrow become compassion strong enough to heal any wound. Jorn placed a lock of hair from his beloved, voicing his hope that love lost becomes love given, flowing between generations like the river through Vigrid. Hala laid her pine bird upon the roots, her eyes shining. Let my voice bring comfort where silence cannot, and let my silence teach me to listen. Bryn blessed, each offering with drops of dew gathered from the oldest leaves. The earth pulsed beneath their feet, a low, golden hum, as if answering. What you give in trust becomes memory. What you shape in memory becomes tradition. What survives tradition becomes myth. As dawn broke, Astrid, Jorn, and Hala witnessed the tokens transformed. The staff sprouted buds, the lock of hair shimmered as river grass, and the pine bird took flight, carrying its song into the morning sky. The stones in the glade glowed with a dozen colors, each hue a story woven into the fate of the forest. Bryn gifted Astrid a pouch of seeds, each one capable of growing a tree of remembrance wherever sorrow needed refuge. Go on, she told them. The last part of every saga asks not how you mourn, but how you teach the world to remember. The travelers departed Vigrid with new wisdom and sacred gifts, their journey now drawn toward its inevitable end. A final village, a final reckoning, where all the strands of grief, and healing would meet. Their way led towards Svanheim, at the shores of the inland sea, the place where the oldest tradition of mourning awaited, and where the fate of their memories, losses, and hopes would be decided. The aurora kindled above Vigrid as they walked, its light full of promise and peace. The days passed with tense anticipation as Eirik and his faithful crew navigated the icy waters toward the unknown western lands. The Raven banner flew high above the dragon-headed prow, and every man aboard sensed the gravity of their quest. Dark clouds rolled over the northern horizon, and whispers of old gods stirred in the wind. Eirik stood at the helm, lightning flickering in his steel-gray eyes. The seas grew wild, waves crashing like ancient beasts against the sides of the ship. Thunder roared, and heavy rain lashed down, threatening to tear the vessel apart. Through the chaos, Eirik bellowed commands, his voice steady. The men rowed with a desperation born of legend, remembering the tales sung by their forebears. At the heart of the storm, Eirik clenched the sword gifted by the seer, its runes glowing with a pale, ethereal fire. As the storm reached its zenith, Eirik raised the sword to the sky, shouting a sacred oath. By Odin's eye and Thor's hammer, I will claim our destiny or perish in the frozen sea. No force shall turn us aside. Lightning struck the mast, illuminating the faces of the crew, determined, fearful, awestruck. The ship, battered yet unbroken, sliced through the roaring waters as if guided by unseen hands. When the sun finally rose, the storm had vanished as quickly as it had descended. On the horizon, land shimmered, a new world draped in mist and promise. Eirik turned to his crew, pride swelling in his chest. We have survived the fury of gods. Now, brothers, let us forge our own saga on these shores. As the ship touched the shore of the unknown land, silence fell, a solemn hush broken only by the surf and the caw of ravens overhead. Eirik leapt overboard first, boots sinking into the black sand, his sword at his side, eyes wide with wonder. The crew followed, each man kneeling briefly in homage to the spirits of this new place, then rising as Vikings ever did, ready to shape their fate. Before them sprawled a wild wood, thick with towering trees and the promise of untold riches and dangers. Eirik led them forward, hearts pounding. They built a fire and offered the gods their thanks for deliverance. That night, tales of their journey joined the crackle of flames, and Eirik gazed at his men, seeing not just warriors, but legends in the making. At dawn, the Vikings set forth to explore. They met challenges, strange beasts, fierce weather, eerie signs left by unknown people. But as days passed, they learned the lay of the land. They hunted, feasted, and carved runes in the stone to mark their claim. On the highest cliff, Eirik planted their banner, wind snapping the fabric. He spoke, "Wherever our feet touch, wherever our swords bite, let the world remember we came as explorers, with courage, loyalty, and fire in our souls." The saga does not end here. It is only the beginning. And thus, the legend of Eirik and his crew echoed across the land. Of Vikings who braved the sea and storm, who dared the unknown, who carved a new chapter in the story of their people. Their saga, etched in song and stone, would be passed down for generations, a reminder that even at world's end, hope and heroism endure.